Hello all you people wondering about skinny and fat boards. Today's video is skinny board versus fat board. Now the first problem I'm coming up with against this is, where do you find a skinny board these days? The skinniest one I have at home is an 8-inch wide. This is a 6-year-old Eric Costin board that we've painted over. I've got it on some 5.0 Ventures, lows, with bones bushings in them as a matter of fact. So yes, I can't find anything skinnier than 8. But I can make something skinnier than 8. This power planer is set up to take about 1/16 of an inch of material off. Let's make this board skinnier. Okay, 3 passes on each side. 7 3/4. You're not likely to find a board much smaller than 7 3/4 these days, so I think that's where I'll go to. Now I'm going to sand these edges down a little bit to make them not feel so sharp. It feels like a sharp plywood edge right now. So the edges are still a little sharp, but at least it's not abrasive to my hands. And you probably can't tell, but it's snowing outside today, so I'm off to the underground to do some flat ground tests on these boards. Got the other one in my van. So let's see what we're comparing against. Again, I've got an old Eric Costin, 5.0 Venture lows, and 52mm Autobahn wheels. These things are ancient. This deck is now measuring in at 7 3/4. 7 13/16. That is a 1/16 of an inch different from end to end. This is supposed to be skinny board versus fat board, not fat board versus oblong board. I'm going home. Okay. Anyways, we also have an 8 3/8 friendship with independent 149s and 51mm bones wheels. So considerably larger. This deck is 5/8 bigger, which for those of you metric people and those of you people who don't know how to read a tape measure, oh, screw it. What's the point? It's about this much bigger. I also want to note that this girl deck is going to be at a disadvantage for 2 reasons. One, because it's a girl deck versus something that was pressed in generator bareback. 2, it's pretty old and has quite a razor tail, so it's going to be mushy and flat, but let's see how it works. Let's see how I'm doing on my flip tricks with this deck and that deck. I'm starting to get warmed up, so let's start off on the big board, the one I'm currently riding and the one I'm used to. There's a lot of board to flip around on this thing, so sometimes if I'm not feeling super sharp, I have a hard time on my more technical tricks. Okay, point made. And you guys have seen a lot of my skating on this deck lately, so let's switch to the skinny board. And I'll show you all my first tries and stuff, see how it feels. Start with Old Faithful. Almost overflipped it on the first go. I think I have to try not to pop any of these or I'm gonna overflip everything. can't believe how much easier 360 flips are for me on this thing. Let's do a couple more. I was getting wheel bite on that almost perfectly 180-degree trick. Let's try the hardest one for me on any board. It still took me a while to land, but night and day easier than trying on a bigger board. Even an 8-inch, I struggle more than that. Let's end it on that note and summarize these boards. I tried to film an ender in that underground and it was horrible, echoey, and had weird shadows. So I'm gonna have to try and remember everything now. So let's start with the big board. The obvious benefits to a big board is there's a lot more to stand on, so it feels more stable. You're gonna feel safer on it. The other thing about riding a wider board is when you manage to flip it around, you have to jump higher, flick harder, but if you get a nice poppy flip, then the catch and the landing can be really satisfying and it can kind of look awesomer. It's a real accomplishment getting this thing flipped up, around, and back under your feet in a nice clean movement. It's obviously going to be more stable in transition. It's also more stable on ledges. The only drawback is if you're into technical ledge tricks, so flipping in, flipping out, any of that sort of stuff, it's going to be more difficult. Manuals, again, are going to feel more stable until you start trying to flip your board around, and then you're going to really be at a disadvantage. There's definitely going to be a lot more heft. These trucks are an inch different in width. They're maybe a 1/4 inch different in height, and that is a huge amount of material to throw around. And the regular Indy Stage 11 149 are by no means anything easy to throw around. Let's get to the smaller deck. So while this did have a disadvantage, being that it was an old girl deck, I think you'll probably notice that I was immediately having a real easy time throwing this thing around. There's tricks that I was doing on this that I wouldn't even try on that board. Partly because of my knee and ankle, but also because I know I'm gonna underflip it and bail. I also know that if I even land it, it's gonna be floppy and not look that nice. But as soon as I stepped on this board, it felt squirrely and tiny, and it's amazing because it's 5/8 of an inch smaller. So that's only just over a 1/4 inch on each side of my foot. But I felt hugely less secure and safe on this board. So I'm amazed that people used to ride handrails on decks like this. 7 3/4 was actually considered a big deck at one point. I remember when I stepped up to 7 3/4 from 7 1/2, and I was pleasantly surprised that actually I can still flip it around and it feels better. I also immediately noticed how much lighter it felt. It just wasn't as hard to get this thing into the air. So it's pretty obvious, and you probably already had an idea before even watching this video, but small decks are gonna flip easier, but feel less safe to land on. Big decks are harder to flip around and much easier to land on when you finally get them there. I'm actually considering having 2 different setups, one for really technical stuff and one for bowl skating and ledge skating and just general usage. But as soon as I want to start flipping my board around, maybe do some flips in or out of manuals, if I can ever get to that again, or flips in and out of ledge tricks, I might start riding a smaller board for those sorts of things. I hope you found this useful. I hope it illustrates the pros and cons of both setups. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.